Meryl, the name that once meant perfection. For more than 50 years, she was the calm in every storm, the actress no one dared to challenge. Every director called her gracious, every co-star called her brilliant. She was Hollywood's untouchable icon, a woman who built her career on kindness, control, and silence. But even silence has limits. At 76, Meryl Streep finally broke them. In a private confession, she admitted what no one expected to hear. There were people she could never forgive, not rivals, not strangers, but legends. The very faces that once stood beside her under blinding lights. They worked with her, smiled for cameras, won awards together, and still, behind closed doors, became the names she could not stand to hear. When the truth surfaced, it tore through Hollywood like a storm. 6 names, 6 stories of betrayal, mockery, and wounds that never healed. Some were her friends, some were her heroes. And one, she said, crossed a line that no artist should ever cross. Stay until the end, because once you hear their names, you will never see Meryl Streep the same way again. If you are ready for the truth behind the curtain, comment the number 1 below. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel, because what you are about to discover is only the beginning. Number 1, Kevin Kline, the partner Meryl Streep swore she would never work with again. It was 1982. The world was watching Sophie's Choice, 2 Oscars, more than $140 million at the box office. Critics called it the most haunting performance of the century. To the audience, Meryl Streep and Kevin Kline looked inseparable. On screen, their love burned with truth, but behind the camera, that same fire was pure friction. Meryl was 33. Kevin was a rising star from Broadway. Confident, quick, impossible to control. For her, the film was sacred work. She spent half a year preparing, reading survivor diaries, studying Polish and German, listening to the voices of those who lived through hell. She carried Sophie's pain as if it were her own. Every syllable mattered. Every pause carried a story. Acting, to her, was devotion. Kevin believed in something else. He called it freedom. He thrived on chaos, on the unexpected breath between words. He thought instinct was truth and rehearsal was the enemy of life. He walked into every scene like a storm, ready to improvise, ready to tear the script apart if it felt too planned. To him, acting was not surgery, it was J's. That difference should have created balance. Instead, it created a battlefield. Crew members still remember the rehearsal that changed everything. Kevin stopped the scene and said calmly, "Are you sure the audience cares more about your Polish vowels than what she is feeling?" The room went silent. For Kevin, it was sarcasm. For Meryl, it was a knife. Because Sophie's broken accent was not decoration. It was survival. It was a wound that never healed. To dismiss it was to dismiss her truth. From that day, she never looked at him the same. During filming, she stayed in character between takes. Withdrawn, fragile, untouchable. He tried to joke, to make her laugh, but the wall was already built. The air on set felt heavy. Even the camera crew whispered that their chemistry had turned into tension so sharp it hummed through every frame. After the premiere, when the film swept awards, Kevin gave an interview. He said her process felt a bit academic. Maybe he meant nothing by it. But for her, who had lived Sophie's grief for months, it was unforgivable. Academic meant lifeless. Academic meant pretend. And she had given too much of herself to be called pretend. The film became legend. Meryl won Best Actress. Kevin became a household name. But when the lights faded, so did their connection. They never worked together again. Not once in more than 4 decades. At award shows they smiled, but the smiles never reached their eyes. She would nod politely. He would wave. Then they would drift away like strangers in the same photograph. Directors tried to reunite them in the late 80s. She refused every offer. One insider said her answer was short and cold. "It is not worth the noise." Those 5 words were enough. She never explained. She never needed to. Kevin Kline went on to build a long career filled with plays, comedies, and acclaim. But his legacy will always carry the shadow of that one film, that one woman who never forgave him. For Meryl Streep, Sophie's choice was more than tragedy. It was truth. It was sacrifice. It was the moment she learned that brilliance can come from pain, but trust, once broken, never returns. And that is why the first name on her silent list is not an enemy or a rival. It is her partner, the man who helped her reach artistic heaven and made her believe in hell, Kevin Kline, the first she never forgave. Number 2, Jeremy Irons, the cold perfection Meryl Streep despised. It was the mid-1980s. Meryl Streep had already conquered Hollywood. 2 Oscars, dozens of nominations, the reputation of being untouchable. Every director wanted to capture that precision, that quiet fire behind her eyes. When her name was paired with Jeremy Irons, critics called it a dream. 2 masters of the craft, 2 actors born from theater, trained in discipline, fluent in elegance. The world expected harmony. What it got instead was frost. On paper, they looked like reflections of each other. Jeremy, the English gentleman sculpted in marble. Meryl, the American chameleon who disappeared into every role. Together, they promised lightning in a bottle. But from the very first rehearsal, it was clear their chemistry existed only on the page. Jeremy Irons approached acting like an architect. Every gesture designed, every pause measured. He rehearsed with surgical precision, his voice calm, his face unreadable. He built his characters from stone. Meryl built hers from blood. She searched for the pulse, the wound, the hidden breath behind every line. He believed emotion should be restrained, controlled like a glass of water balanced on the edge of a table. She believed emotion should spill, drown, and flood the floor. At first, they tried to find common ground. The first week of rehearsals went politely. They discussed motivation, tone, history, but something invisible began to grow between them. She found him distant. He found her excessive. What began as professional disagreement turned into quiet disdain. One afternoon, during a tense rehearsal, the break came. Jeremy watched as she repeated the same line, experimenting with subtle changes in accent and rhythm. After several takes, he said softly, "That is a beautiful trick, but sometimes less technique and more truth would do." The room froze. The crew stared at the floor. Meryl stood silent for a moment, then walked away. For her, that sentence was not a suggestion. It was a judgment. To call her work a trick that he was to erase the meaning behind it. And Meryl once said that an accent is not performance. It is biography. To her, a voice that carried the scars of where a person had been. The sound of struggle, displacement, identity. Jeremy had reduced it to decoration. From that day on, every scene between them turned into a duel. His calm precision against her raw emotion, his stillness against her storm. When the cameras rolled, they looked perfect together. But underneath the surface, it was war disguised as professionalism. Crew members later said you could feel the tension through the lens, like static before lightning. He thought she was indulgent. She thought he was hollow. 2 artists circling the same truth from opposite sides, never touching it. Between takes, they barely spoke. He retreated to his script, she to her notes. Their silence was louder than any argument. When filming ended, they stood for a photo, smiling as professionals do, but the distance between them was visible. Her body angled away, his gaze somewhere else. Hollywood read that photo and knew something had gone wrong. Months later, Jeremy gave an interview to a British magazine. He praised Meryl's dedication but said that sometimes acting becomes an exercise in control rather than connection. For her, that sentence was confirmation of what she already felt. To him, she was technique. To her, he was emptiness. After that, Meryl refused every proposal that included his name. Producers tried to tempt her with prestige, awards, new scripts. She said no to all of them. One assistant director recalled that she called their collaboration beautifully cold, a phrase that meant never again. It was a tragedy of talent. Two of the most gifted performers of their generation could have created something historic. Instead, their partnership became a cautionary tale whispered through film schools and backlots, proof that brilliance cannot always coexist. Jeremy Irons went on to win an Oscar of his own in 1991 for Reversal of Fortune. Critics called his performance perfect, chilling, controlled, exactly the qualities that had once driven Meryl away. She never mentioned him again publicly, not even when asked directly. Her silence spoke louder than any criticism. For her, the wound was not personal. It was philosophical. Acting, to Meryl Streep, was the art of empathy. To Jeremy Irons, it was the art of design. Two faiths, two us, one war. Years later, when she was asked about the hardest people to work with, she smiled and said, "The ones who forget that emotion is not a weakness." She never said his name. She never had to. Everyone already knew. Their scenes together remain breathtaking. Viewers still feel the tension, the precision, the brilliance. But if you look closely, there is something else hiding there, a chill beneath the beauty, the calm of a glacier before it cracks. Jeremy Irons, the man carved in elegance, became the second name on her secret list. He represented something larger than conflict. He was the moment admiration turned to contempt, the living proof that perfection without warmth is just ice pretending to be art. And that is why number two belongs to him. The cold perfection Meryl Streep could never forgive. It was 2009. Hollywood was ready for something lighter, something charming. Its complicated, promised warmth, laughter, and chemistry between two legends. Meryl Streep, then 60, was America's most respected actress. Alec Baldwin, 51, was television's king of charisma. Fresh from the success of 30 Rock, the world expected a romantic comedy built on charm. What they got was a silent war disguised as a smile. From the outside, it looked effortless. Their banter, their laughter, their timing. On screen, they were perfect. Behind the camera, they were fire and ice. Director Nancy Meyers once said she thought pairing them would balance opposites. Meryl's precision against Alec's spontaneity, discipline meeting chaos. She was wrong. For Meryl, every scene was built like architecture. She mapped Jane Adler's heartbreak, her humor, her hesitation. She studied tone, movement, even the rhythm of breath between sentences. Comedy, she believed, had to be grounded in truth. Every line mattered. Every pause revealed something about the soul. Alec Baldwin believed truth could only be found in the moment. He thrived on improvisation. He threw away lines, invented new ones, and changed rhythm without warning. He said that real comedy lives in surprise. Meryl said that surprise without control was noise. Their two philosophies collided every single day. Crew members later called it the most polite conflict in Hollywood. There were no shouts, no insults, no tantrums, just tensions so sharp that everyone could feel it. Between takes, Alec would laugh loudly, tell stories, fill the room with noise. Meryl sat alone, rewriting notes, focused, detached. When the cameras rolled, they met in the middle of the frame like two dueling musicians playing different songs in the same key. At first, Nancy Meyers tried to mediate. She encouraged Alec's improvisation, hoping it would loosen Meryl's precision. Instead, it tightened her resistance. During one rehearsal, Alec changed a line in the middle of an emotional scene. Meryl stopped cold and said quietly, "Comedy must be grounded in truth." Baldwin smiled, shrugged, and said, "Truth is what happens when you stop planning it." The room went still. The crew looked at their feet. The take never resumed. From then on, their relationship became professional, but cold. They delivered what the film needed, but nothing more. Every romantic glance on screen was calculated. Every laugh timed like choreography. The audience saw chemistry. The crew saw control. After the film wrapped, Alex spoke warmly about Meryl in interviews. He called her the greatest actress alive, the most generous scene partner. But off record, crew members remembered his jokes. He said she rehearsed until the joy disappeared. She said he improvised until the truth evaporated. Two actors at the height of their craft, each convinced the other was the problem. It's Complicated became a box office success, grossing more than $200 million worldwide. Critics praised the performances, called their tension irresistible. What they didn't know was that the tension was real. It was frustration painted as flirtation. At the Golden Globes, they smiled side by side. Flashbulbs burst. Headlines praised their chemistry. But when the camera stopped, they walked separate directions without a word. Those who watched closely said you could see the chill even through her perfect smile. For Meryl, the experience was exhausting. She told friends that comedy without discipline was chaos. For Alec, it was the opposite. He believed control killed spontaneity. They were two artists standing on opposite sides of the same mirror, each watching the other and seeing everything they refused to be. Years later, when asked about the film, Alec laughed it off. He said working with her was like sparring with a queen who never missed a step. It sounded like praise, but it was a confession. He never won that battle. She never forgave the disruption. Their performances remain adored. Their chemistry feels effortless, natural, full of spark. But every laugh hides clenched teeth. Every touch hides calculation. What audiences thought was attraction was really endurance. And that is why number 3 belongs to Alec Baldwin, the charming improviser who made her fury look like laughter, the man who turned a romantic comedy into a war of precision and chaos, the partner who proved that even in Hollywood, perfection on screen can hide disaster just out of frame. Number 4, Jack Nicholson, the co-star Meryl Streep could never accept. From the moment Hollywood crowned them its twin titans, producers dreamed of putting them together, two legends in one frame. Jack Nicholson, the rebel king of American cinema, the face of wild brilliance. Meryl Streep, the queen of precision, discipline, and empathy. Every studio executive believed that a film with both would write itself into history. But what they never understood was that Streep would rather walk away from gold than stand beside a man who represented everything she despised. Since the late 1970s, their paths kept circling each other. She had just won her first Oscar for Kramer versus Kramer. He had conquered the world with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Shining. He was chaos in a leather jacket. She was control wrapped in calm. Hollywood thought opposites would attract. Instead, they repelled. Behind closed doors, Streep turned down at least 3 major projects that paired her with Nicholson. A courtroom drama, a political thriller, a romantic tragedy. Each time, the reason was the same. She said quietly, it would not work. No explanation, no argument, just finality. Insiders called it the coldest no in the business. Her refusal came down to belief. To her, acting was a moral act, a duty to truth. She built her characters from empathy, research, and lived experience. Nicholson treated acting like a game of instinct. He believed in the spark of the moment, the thrill of not knowing what came next. When asked about preparation, he laughed and said, "Preparation, that is intellectual masturbation." The quote ran in every magazine. To fans, it was funny. To Streep, it was blasphemy. She once said that authenticity is sacred. To mock it was to mock the very soul of the craft. From that day, she saw him not as a rival, but as a symbol of everything wrong with fame, talent without humility, confidence without conscience. Casting director Juliet Taylor confirmed it years later. Jack, she said, represents everything Meryl thinks is wrong with stardom. The flash, the noise, the arrogance. At industry galas, their encounters were brief and frozen. Cameras caught them in the same frame, smiling politely, but their eyes told a different story. His grin looked like defiance. Hers looked like distance. The air between them felt cold enough to crack glass. In 1989, a high-profile studio offered them a massive project, a film adaptation of Heartburn, based on Nora Ephron's novel of betrayal and loss. Meryl agreed, but only if the male lead was replaced. The studio resisted. She stood firm. Eventually, Jack Stephanopoint and Jack Nicholson's name disappeared from the credits. That decision cost the film momentum, but she never regretted it. People close to her said that what bothered Meryl was not Jack's talent. She respected it, but his attitude toward the work. He spoke about roles like trophies, like conquests. She treated them like vows. When he joked in interviews about women, power, and pleasure, she saw not charm, but a reminder of the old Hollywood she had spent decades trying to outgrow. Their philosophies could not coexist. He believed art was born from appetite. She believed it was born from empathy. He wanted sparks. She wanted soul. At award shows, they crossed paths like ghosts. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes she did not. Reporters always hoped for a photo, a handshake, some thaw. It never came. One journalist who followed them for years wrote, "When they enter the same room, the temperature drops." By the 2000s, the idea of them working together had become a running joke in the industry. One director said, "You could offer them the moon, and Meryl would still say no." She did not hate Jack Nicholson as a man. She hated what he stood for. Bravado over honesty, performance over purpose. Jack himself seemed amused by the tension. In a late interview, he said he admired her talent but doubted they could share space. He called her the priestess of control. She never responded. Silence, once again, was her weapon of choice. Their careers continued to mirror each other. Oscars, accolades, decades of mastery. Yet their shared absence became its own kind of legacy. The greatest pair that never was, and that is why number 4 belongs to Jack Nicholson, the legend she never worked with, the icon she quietly rejected, the man whose style she considered the enemy of art. Two giants divided not by scandal, but by principle. In the end, it was not hatred that kept them apart. It was belief. For Meryl Streep, art demanded respect. For Jack Nicholson, it demanded pleasure. And between those two Guam, no bridge could ever stand. Number 5, Gwyneth Paltrow, the symbol of everything Meryl Streep hated about modern Hollywood. By the late 1990s, Meryl Streep had spent 2 decades building a legacy out of discipline. To her, acting was sacred labor, not stardom. Every role was a craft, every accent a piece of history, every gesture a conversation with truth. Then came Gwyneth Paltrow, young, elegant, golden-haired, and effortlessly adored. In the eyes of Hollywood, she was the future. In the eyes of Meryl Streep, she was a warning. Paltrow represented a new kind of celebrity, born into privilege, daughter of actress Blythe Danner and director Bruce Paltrow. She grew up in the heart of the industry. Doors opened before she ever knocked. Critics called her graceful, ethereal, the embodiment of effortless beauty. But to Streep, effort was everything. She had fought her way through theater, rejection, and roles that demanded blood, not glamour. Watching Gwyneth rise so easily felt like watching the craft itself lose its meaning. The tension reached its quiet peak in 1999. That year, Meryl gave one of her most emotionally draining performances in One True Thing, a film that explored guilt, death, and the quiet strength of mothers. Her performance was raw and devastating. Many predicted she would take home her 3rd Oscar. Then came Shakespeare in Love, a dazzling romantic fantasy led by 26-year-old Gwyneth Paltrow. When the envelopes opened at the Academy Awards, it was Gwyneth who won Best Actress. Meryl applauded, smiled, even hugged her. But those close to her said the moment cut deep. Later, when asked about that awards season, Streep told friends it felt more like a marketing contest than a celebration of art. She never said Paltrow's name, but everyone knew who she meant. For Meryl, the problem was not jealousy, it was what the win symbolized. To her, it marked a turning point where popularity began to outweigh preparation, where charm was mistaken for depth. She had spent months inside her character, studying illness, motherhood, emotional decay. Gwyneth, in her eyes, had floated through a fairy tale and walked away with gold. After that night, Streep avoided any public comparison. When journalists asked her about rising actresses, she praised Kate Blanchett, Amy Adams, and Jessica Chastain, women known for their research and intensity. She never once mentioned Gwyneth Paltrow. At award shows, their encounters were brief, polite, and empty. They smiled for cameras, then turned in opposite directions. Behind the scenes, colleagues noticed the chill. One producer recalled that during casting talks for a mid-2000s ensemble film, someone suggested Paltrow for a role opposite Streep. Meryl's response was calm but final. Let us not mix perfume with sweat. The room went silent. Everyone understood. As the years passed, their careers diverged. Meryl continued choosing complex, layered roles such as The Hours, Doubt in The Iron Lady. Gwyneth moved toward lifestyle branding. Her company Goop became a multi-million-dollar empire selling wellness, luxury, and dreams. To many, she symbolized success. To Streep, she symbolized everything the art had lost: depth, humility, devotion. When asked once about the difference between acting then and acting now, Meryl replied, "It used to be about listening to people's pain. Now it is about managing an image." Again, she never said a name, but her meaning was clear. The distance between them was not hatred. It was principle. Meryl believed that fame without purpose was hollow. Gwyneth built a career proving that fame alone could be enough. One represented legacy, the other represented celebrity culture. And between them stood a gulf too wide to cross. In private, friends say Meryl saw Paltrow as a symptom, not an enemy. A product of a system that traded truth for sparkle, but symbols have power. And for Meryl, Gwyneth became one. The glittering reflection of everything she had fought not to become. Years later, when Paltrow was asked about Meryl, she called her a goddess, a role model, a legend. Meryl never responded. Silence, as always, was her answer. Their paths still cross at charity events and award galas, their smiles still flawless under flashing lights. Yet even now, the distance remains. Two women standing in the same spotlight, but staring in opposite directions. One toward art, the other toward empire. And that is why number 5 belongs to Gwyneth Paltrow. Not because of betrayal or rivalry, but because of ideology. She embodied a Hollywood that Meryl Streep could never respect. The effortless star who turned talent into a brand and legacy into lifestyle. The proof that in the new century, brilliance could be replaced by beauty and truth could be sold in a bottle. Number 6, Dustin Hoffman. The slap Meryl Streep never forgave. It was 1979. Kramer versus Kramer had just begun filming in New York. A quiet domestic drama that would soon win 5 Academy Awards and redefine both its stars. For audiences, it told the story of divorce, heartbreak, and reconciliation. For Meryl Streep, it became something else entirely. A lesson about trust, boundaries, and the moment when art crosses the line into cruelty. Meryl was 30 years old, still new to fame but already recognized as one of the most promising actors of her generation. She approached the role of Joanna Kramer with care and discipline, crafting each scene through empathy. Dustin Hoffman, 15 years older, was a Hollywood veteran. He came from the world of method acting, where truth was dragged out through pain and pain. He believed that real emotion could not be rehearsed. It had to be provoked. From the first week on set, their methods clashed. Meryl built her performance through understanding. Dustin built his through disruption. He whispered insults before takes, slammed doors without warning, and threw unscripted lines to catch her off guard. He called it technique. She called it invasion. Then came the scene that would mark them both forever. During the filming of a heated argument, Hoffman suddenly slapped her across the face. It was not in the script. It was not discussed. The sound echoed through the room, cameras kept rolling, and what the audience later saw as heartbreak was in fact shock. Real and unfiltered. No one intervened. The director, Robert Benton, let the scene continue. He later said he wanted authenticity. Meryl finished the take, eyes wet, voice trembling, then left the set without a word. Crew members said the silence that followed was unbearable. For Hoffman, the slap was method. For Streep, it was betrayal. Acting to her was built on trust. Every gesture, every line, depended on mutual respect. To be blindsided like that was not creation. It was humiliation. Years later, she spoke about it briefly. That was overstepping. That was not acting. Those words carried decades of restraint. Despite the tension, Kramer versus Kramer became a triumph. The film won 5 Oscars, including Best Actor for Hoffman and Best Supporting Actress for Streep. Critics praised their chemistry, calling it electric, intimate, unforgettable. They did not know the electricity came from real conflict, and the intimacy came from pain neither could forget. Behind the scenes, Benton became more referee than director. He balanced Hoffman's improvisation with Streep's control, trying to keep the film from collapsing under tension. The set was professional, but never peaceful. Crew members whispered that some of the most powerful scenes were not performances at all, but genuine outbursts of frustration. After the Oscars, they stood together for photos, smiling beneath golden lights. Yet everyone who knew them understood. The warmth was an act. They never worked together again. Not once, not in sequels, not in stage reunions, not even in tributes. The silence between them lasted decades. For Hoffman, the story became a legend of method acting. For Streep, it became a private scar. She respected his talent, but never forgot his disregard. To her, art demanded courage, not cruelty. When asked years later about method actors, Meryl said that some confuse pain with depth. It was the closest she ever came to naming him. She believed art could reach truth without hurting anyone. Hoffman believed pain was the price, and that is why number 6 belongs to Dustin Hoffman. The man who searched for authenticity went too far, the partner who confused violence with genius, the co-star who taught Meryl Streep that brilliance without respect is just abuse with the spotlight. The scene won them awards. The film made them legends. But for her, that moment would never fade. It remained the final entry on her list, the last name she never forgave. When we look back at these 6 names, it is easy to see only the drama, the clashes, the tension, the cold silences that followed decades of fame, but behind every story is something far deeper. Meryl Streep's grudges were never about ego. They were about belief, about the thin line between art and vanity, between respect and exploitation. She fought to protect the craft she loved, even when it meant losing friends or saying no to legends. Each name on her list teaches a lesson. Kevin Kline reminds us that talent means nothing without trust. Jeremy Irons shows that perfection without empathy is just a mask. Alec Baldwin proves that chaos is not creativity when it crushes partnership. Jack Nicholson stands as a warning that confidence without humility can turn brilliance into arrogance. Gwyneth Paltrow reveals how easily art can be replaced by image. And Dustin Hoffman, perhaps most painfully, shows that the search for truth can destroy it when respect disappears. Through them, Meryl's story becomes more than gossip. It becomes a reflection of how fragile integrity is in any creative world. She proved that greatness is not only about winning awards, but about protecting your values even when no one else does. She stood for every artist who has ever chosen honesty over applause. Maybe that is why people still admire her, not just for her performances, but for her strength. Because the hardest thing in any career, not only in Hollywood, is to stay true when compromise looks easier. If you have watched until now, thank you for staying with this story. I would love to hear what you think. Which of these lessons stayed with you the most? Leave your thoughts below. And if you made it to the end, comment the number 1 so I know you are still here, still listening, still feeling. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories behind the legends. Because sometimes the truth behind the curtain tells us more than the performance ever could. Ever could. Ever could. ever could, ever